Welcome, everybody, to Triangle Be Well. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson, and I am joined in the studio today by Amnon Nissan. Hello, Amnon.
Hello, Howard.
How are you?
I'm great. How you been?
I am great. I'm exhausted for some reason. I spent several hours last night not watching the Super Bowl, and it must really have taken it out of
Yeah.
me.
So that's why I'm tired because I did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's just easier, this it's just easier to give in and just go stare at a screen and pretend to care, but
Uh,
sometimes we got to do what we got to do. Congratulations to everyone whose team won. The rabbits or the eagles or the whoever it happened to be. Um,
exactly the
I
way
forget I forget the comedian who talked about it'd be cool if you had like the actual things fighting each other. So like a panther versus a bronco, like that would be cool. But anyway, today we're going to talk about habits and behavior change, and this is part 4 of a one-part series that has just continued and continued. I had no idea I had so much to say about it. Before we get into that, and then I'm expecting to finish this fourth part today, and then go on to another topic. But before we get into it, a couple of events coming up if you live in the Triangle region of North Carolina. First one is the pre-Valentine's Day healthy chocolate dreams class that I'm giving in Chapel Hill on the 13th, Saturday, the 13th of February from 3 to 5 p.m. And basically, I have been going out and I've really sacrificed for you the past couple of weeks. I have been making chocolate dessert after chocolate dessert, finding recipes, testing them, refining them. I've also forced my family to participate and to taste it and tell me what they like and they don't like. And I got to say, there's a lot of recipes out there that have not passed the test. They were too sweet. They were kind of weird. They were weirdly textured. They were ended up being too hard to make or too expensive. So out of all of those recipes, I'm narrowing it down to just about 5 or 6 things you can do for your sweet tooth, for your chocolate tooth, that are pretty healthy. Now, they're not going to be, the food you can eat every day. I'm not going to say, ditch the potatoes and spinach and kale and lentils and just have these things. But in terms of treats, they can't be beat. They're healthy, they're delicious, they're pretty easy to make, they are not expensive, they don't require strange exotic ingredients that you have to go to the ends of the earth for. And they're great. They're really satisfying, filling. I don't know if you ever get that feeling where you just want something made of chocolate, but you don't want to feel bad afterwards. You don't want that feeling of all that butter fat and cream and eggs, all that refined sugar. So these recipes don't have any refined sugar. They don't have any gluten. They're just delicious. And dare I say, chocolate still in this culture is a romantic thing. So if you're going to treat yourself to chocolate, this is a pretty good month to do it. So you can find out more about that event at trianglebewell.com and just click the events tab, the events button on the top navigation bar. That's one. Second event coming up is an introductory dinner. If you are interested in finding out about the latest, the cutting edge science on the relationship between lifestyle and health, between diet and disease, and you just want to know, how do I eat well? How do I feed my family well? How do I avoid becoming another victim of the medical pharmaceutical establishment who are going to medicate us and operate on us to within an inch of our lives to deal with symptoms that we can most often control or reverse through lifestyle? Again, check that out, trianglebewell.com/events. And that's on Thursday evening, the 18th of February, again in Chapel Hill. Finally, on the 20th of February, which is a Saturday, I'm teaching my monthly class on how to do your diet and lifestyle transition. This is a comprehensive 3-hour course. It involves a lot of food. It involves talking about how you actually transition, how you work your kitchen, how you do the pantry. And this class is free. It's only available to members of Triangle Be Well. And I do this once a month. So if you're interested in taking that class, mosey on over to Triangle Be Well and click the join button in the top right, and then you'll be eligible to come to this. If you don't make this one, I'll do another one in another month, sometime in March, and I'll let you know those dates as well. So let's talk about habits, behavior change. So we were at the end of last episode talking about tweaking your backdrop. Remember, there was an ABC. 80-20. Amnon has the note. I wrote it in my calendar. So B was for backdrop. Actually, the ABC was I don't remember. But you know what? You've got it on YouTube, Nissan Communications. You can go and listen, and so can I. So we were talking about tweaking the backdrop, and what I wanted to begin with, as Amnon just reminded me, is the 80-20 principle. And as applied, I'll kind of apply it and then kind of back up and say what it is. So basically, when you're looking at tweaking your environment, you could do any number of things. You could move to another country. You could move to another house. You could take all your clothes, put them in a pile, put them in bags, give them to Goodwill, and get a total makeover. You could replace the cutlery in your house with chopsticks. Right? There's no end to the sorts of things you can do to change your environment. But what we're looking for in an 80-20 is the smallest changes that will have the biggest effects. So 80-20 comes from the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle, named after Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto, who started noticing that things aren't equal in the world. And he was thinking about inputs and outputs, that certain inputs have a disproportionate effect on the outcome. And he called these the vital few. So for example, you may have 40 different tasks that you do as part of your work. You know, for me, I think of it as an entrepreneur running a business. Let's say there's 40 things that I do. I answer emails, I pay bills, I do financial projections, I write web pages, I do research, I format documents. This is italic, that's bold, this is Helvetica New Light. What Pareto's principle says is, of all those things, about 20%, about 1/5 of them, actually matter more than the rest. And not just more than the rest, but exponentially more than the rest. If I'm doing 40 things, that means that about 8 of them are more important than all the other 32 put together by a factor of 16. That 20% accounts for 80% of my results. So you might say, you know what? I spent 2 hours doing this presentation, and I spent half of it formatting because I really wanted to get the look right. You might argue that that's not important compared to the research I'm doing. Or you might even say that doing the research, I could have done a half-ass job with the research as long as I spent enough time promoting it on Blab and getting people to come and watch it and, you know, posting it, that really it's the marketing that's the most important thing. Or maybe for my podcast, it's spending the time to generate relationships with great guests, and the show notes are really not that important. And we never know. But when we're looking at changing anything, especially changing an environment, we're looking for the 80-20. We're looking for the vital few. We're looking for little things that have a big impact. So that's the question you want to ask. What are the smallest tweaks that I can make to my backdrop, to my environment, that can lead to the biggest results? So it might be, and here again, we're looking at BJ Fogg's behavior model, and we think about motivation versus ability. We really want to make little tweaks that will forever increase our ability, forever make it easier to do the things we want to do. So we talked about like the glass water bottle. We talked about having a spice shaker that has healthy spices right on the dinner table instead of up in the spice cabinet in the pantry, or take a class, which changes your own ability. So now that everything becomes easier, or sign up instead of thinking about going to exercise, sign up for a personal trainer or join a gym somewhere where you now have skin in the game, where you're more likely to get up tomorrow morning and do it because of something you did today. So let's now look at this idea of tweaking the environment and remember why we're doing it. Because if we ignore, remember the backdrop, our environment is trigger rich. Everything we see in our environment becomes a trigger to a thought, to an impulse, to a behavior. So if our environment is trigger rich and we don't like the way we're behaving, we have to then tweak some of those triggers. If we don't, if we ignore the backdrop and we just say, in the face of all these triggers, I'm going to stay strong, we can do it for a little while, but we can't do it forever. And eventually we're going to backslide, and then we're going to end up blaming ourselves when in fact the fault, dear Brutus, is not in ourselves, but in our environment that we are triggered. And so that's unfair to blame ourselves for being unable to hold to an impossible standard of behavior. It's also incorrect that when you diagnose a problem poorly, you tend not to solve it. So if my response is, well, I haven't changed my behavior, and it's my fault, I'm weak, I'm undisciplined, I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated, I'm psychologically screwed up, as long as I'm pointing the finger at myself, not only is it not fair and disempowering, but I'm not looking at where I can make a difference. I don't have any agency because I've diagnosed the problem wrong. And remember, we talked about the addiction cycle, where we are upset, we're trying to numb out or distract ourselves from some negative feeling. And one of the ways we do that is with food. Another way we do it is with internet or TV, or certainly things that don't involve physical activity. So our lifestyles become complicit in this numbing out. And of course, the more we use these maladaptive strategies, these strategies that don't work, the more ashamed we feel of our binge, of our, blowing off exercise, of eating foods we didn't mean to eat. And that just continually fuels this vicious addiction cycle. Tweaking the environment increases our ability. It doesn't do anything with motivation, not necessarily, but it certainly will increase our ability. By that we mean making it easier in the future to do the behaviors we want to do. And one way to tweak, and it's really important, is to add triggers for the things we want to do, or if there is a trigger, to intensify it. Remember, I moved the floss from the side of the cabinet to dead center so I could see it. So anything that we do that intensifies a trigger, and sometimes this has to be a dynamic process. It's not once and done. I don't know if you've ever written down an inspirational quote on a Post-it note and put it on your fridge or your bathroom mirror, or your screensaver is something you want to remember. And after a while, it becomes background. It becomes wallpaper, and we don't even see it anymore. So you want to be sure that your triggers in your environment are working. So if it's a behavior that you've already got nailed, let's say for me, it's shaving in the morning. Well, I walk into the bathroom and I just feel, oh, I'm bristly, I need to shave. Then the only trigger I need is walking into the bathroom. But if I weren't shaving, or let's say I've just shaved my head and I have to start shaving my head, maybe I don't remember, and after a few weeks, it's all growing back, all fuzzy and moldy, and I don't like it. Maybe I need a trigger. Maybe I need to take my head shaving razor and put it where it's visible, not in the drawer, but right there next to the sink, and that will remind me. Or maybe I get a marker and I draw a big fuzzy hair where I would stand to remind me. So triggers need to be dynamic and sort of in your face, flashing and new when you're just starting a behavior. But once you've got it nailed, the trigger can be very, very subtle. We don't even have to register the trigger in order for it to act on us. And we tweak our backgrounds because we don't want to have to rely on motivation. If we rely on motivation, as soon as our environment gets in our way, we give up, we collapse. We say, well, I'll just go back to sitting on the couch, pushing the remote and eating pizza. But if our environment doesn't include a couch, a remote, a TV, and pizza, if it includes a treadmill, if it includes free weights, if it includes a yoga mat, and those become our triggers, then we don't need the motivation. We just walk in and we start automatically doing the behavior, doing the yoga, doing the weightlifting, putting on our running shoes and going out for a run. Excellent vintage of water today. Today's session, as always, is brought to you by Drinking Water. You know, I do take it for granted, but you know, when you look at the news and you see communities around the country that do not have access to fresh drinking water, if you have it, you know, it's not something to take lightly. Thank you. I'm not going to fill me up. So soon he's just going to get a giant bag, and I'm just going to drink from it like like an infant. But right now we're still in glasses. All right. So to recap the whole thing, we talked about when we began this epic odyssey of behavior. We talked about why it's hard to change habits and behaviors, and all the mindsets that we have that get in the way, all the ideas, all the thought patterns, all the strategies that don't work. We talked about addictions. We talked about something that starts with the letter B. We talked about confusion. Then we talked about 3 mindsets that do work, and they were 3 Ps, right? They were patient, playful, and positive. Oh, it's all coming back to me now. And then we looked at 3 strategies that worked. We looked at shrink the shift, tweak the backdrop, and today the 3rd strategy, thank you very much, my imbisason. My imbisason. Today's number 3, we're going to talk about 2 strategies wrapped into one, and I call them pre-worry and post-mortem. So here's the thing. You're going to make these shifts. You want to change your behaviors, change your diet, change your exercise habits, change habits, become a new person. And you have the best of intentions, and you're using the right strategies and the right mindsets. But you know what? Life throws us curveballs, and my prediction is you will not be perfect. Now, I'm not speaking to all of you right now. I'm speaking to a part of you, which is to say I'm speaking to everyone, but I'm speaking to a particular part of everyone. So there's a part of you that I want to not listen right now. And that's the part that is saying, I commit to making these changes, and I'm never going to waver. So my friend Glenn Livingston, who has written a book called Never Binge Again, talks about these conflicting ideas we have to hold. One idea is, I will never binge again. I will never engage in this behavior again. And the other is, realistically, you probably will, and you have to recover from it. So we don't want to engage in what researchers call the what the hell effect. I was just reading a book by Duke behavioral psychology professor Dan Ariely called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. And he talks about the what the hell effect in terms of, it's kind of in for a penny, in for a pound in a negative sense. So you have just eaten a bit of a cookie that's not on your diet plan. The what the hell effect is, oh, what the hell, I might as well finish off the entire box. In Dan's book, it looks at people who engage in a small amount of cheating, and then the opportunity to do larger amounts, and it's kind of the slippery slope. So the part of you that is saying right now, I will never binge again, I will never depart from these habits, I'll never detour, there's no weakness, I am committed, right? That's the part, if you got married and you said your vows, that's the part that said, I am going to be faithful, I'm going to love, honor, in sickness and obey. I left that out. That's I think that one's negotiable. I think love and honor are more of the basis. You can work out obey on your own. But you know, in sicknesses and in health, you know, the part of you that makes that vow isn't going, yeah, I'll probably keep that most of the time. But we also know that people are human, and mess ups happen, and there has to be room for repair, for forgiveness in a relationship. And there has to be room for forgiveness within yourself, even though the part of you that's making the commitment to this new lifestyle is saying, I am not going to cheat. I am not going to binge. I'm not going to make these deals with my future self. This is the way it's going to be until the day I die. Now, we all know, though, that life intervenes. Life is what happens while we're making other plans, said John Lennon. And so what do we do when something either it's happened, we've broken our rule for ourselves, or we see a situation in the future where we think that we might be vulnerable. So that's why we pre-worry and post-mortem, because realistically, you're not going to be perfect. And I'm only speaking to the part of you that acknowledges that. The other part that's about to say the wedding vows, is about to slip the ring of health onto your own finger. Of course, you're never going to be unfaithful to yourself. But you're also going to experience temptation. You may experience setbacks. And here's another way to think about it. You may encounter situations you are not yet equal to. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great feature of life? That we encounter things that we're not yet equal to. Otherwise, why would we ever grow? Right? Little baby lying on their back, all their needs are met, and then baby wants to see something and nobody's getting it for them, and baby's not able to articulate, hey, please bring me that colorful red ring over there. Baby's frustrated, not being understood, and so the baby has to kind of flip over and start to learn to crawl. Can't do it yet. Baby has encountered a situation she or he is not yet equal to. And so that leads to a whole new skill. Then standing, then walking, then running. So everything we learn to do in life, we had to learn in response to a situation to which we were not yet equal. And that may happen to you as you adopt a healthy lifestyle. You may discover that you're going to the Super Bowl party and all these foods are there that have been your trigger foods, and the Super Bowl's on, and all your friends, and you've always eaten, buffalo wings dipped in ranch dressing, and you can smell them, and everyone else is eating them, and you come to this Super Bowl party because this is where your friends are, and that's what they're doing, and you're the only one who is interested in healthy eating, and you look over, and there's a sad little plate of celery sticks in the corner, and no one's anywhere near it. Everyone's doing the dips and the 7-layer and the guacamole and the buffalo wings. And you go to town and you have one. You go, oh my gosh, this is so good. I'll just have one. Well, just two, because a chicken is 2 wings. It's symmetrical. And pretty soon you just have a giant plate of bones. And you realize, I was not equal to this situation. Instead of beating yourself up over it, saying this was a situation in which you were bound. It was almost impossible, given your current level of skill, commitment, strategy, mindset, that you could have resisted this for long. So the question is, at that point, do you give up? It's the what the hell effect. The language we use in addiction is you fall off the wagon. So picture that. You're on a wagon. It's bouncing along. You're gripping the reins for dear life, right? You're in the wagon. You're not even on the horse. You're not even in the driver's seat in the cab. You're in the wagon. So you have no control. You're just sort of clinging to the side, and then it hits a bump, and off you go. You tumble out of the wagon. You've fallen off the wagon. Now where are you? You're in like a rut in the road. You're in a ditch. Other traffic is like riding over you. That's our image, right? Metaphors are very powerful. That's a very generative, powerful image of helplessness. Of lack of agency while you're in the wagon, and helplessness and pain and degradation when you're off the wagon. So of course, if that's the way you think about sobriety, if that's the way you think about maintaining healthy habits, then you're not going to be able to do anything when something goes wrong, when you fall off the wagon. But who has to say, if you eat a cookie, who has to say, oh well, now I might as well eat the rest of the box? Eating a cookie once in a while is not problematic for most people. It's not harmful. It's the box that's the problem. It's not the singular event. And then when we give up, when we say, what the hell, that not only brings us back into whatever addictive cycle, whatever poor habits, poor choices we've made, it also sends a meta message. It sends a message to ourselves that what? We couldn't do it. We weren't strong enough. I can't do it. I give up. And that's not just about the behavior, that becomes global. And if you talk about the spiral of shame and disempowerment, when we engage in a what the hell, then we compound that by a lot. And that just reinforces the undesired behavior. So BJ Fogg points out that if we're trying to help people change their habits, change their behaviors, and we do it poorly, we've committed some kind of malpractice, because failing is worse than not trying if it means we give up. If it means, okay, I failed, which means I'll never be able to do it. So now not only are we back where we were, but we feel worse and we feel less confident to try next time. Or we can get stronger. We can take a failure and we can use it to make ourselves stronger. You ever lift weights or work out or do any sort of muscle work? You could lift weights for hours and actually not get any stronger. Let's say you took a ramen noodle pack, dry, and you say, well, I'm going to lift this 100 times. You take that dry ramen noodle pack, it weighs, 1.2 ounces, and you lift it over your head, lift it over your head, lift it over your head. You say, well, it's light, but I'll do a lot of reps. That's not how it works. What you want to do to grow muscles is grow them to failure, which means if you're doing push-ups, you do push-ups until the next time you try to go up, there's simply nothing left in the tank. You cannot go up anymore, and you try. And at that point of failure, if you can manage to squeeze one more out, then you know you've just built new muscle. Or if you can't, you know you've just built new muscle. So stressing something to failure, interesting word there, right? But it doesn't have a negative connotation. Stressing something to failure can make you stronger. Obstacles build capacity. Just like that baby who can't crawl over to get the shiny red ring, obstacles are what we use to grow. And so whenever you're engaging in a behavior change, it's really important to prepare for and expect moments of vulnerability and setbacks. There is a line that has become one of my mantras. It's from a book called Change Anything. And I remember one of the authors' name is Grenny, Grenny. There's a whole bunch of authors, like 7 of them. And they're from the Vital Smarts organization. The book is called Change Anything. And the line is this: turn a bad day into good data. And this goes back to our mindset, right, on playful, on experimenting. So that now what happened is I was at the Super Bowl party, for example, and I ate a bucket of chicken wings and 4 pounds of 7-layer dip and 3 bags of Doritos. So I think we could all agree that given a healthy diet, that was a bad day. Right? But instead of just saying, oh, what the hell, I give up, I'm a failure, this doesn't work for me, this isn't for me, I'm too screwed up, we say, what happened? And we look at like an experimenter, like a scientist, and we look for good data. So what happened was, did I go to this party hungry? Could I have, did I have a late breakfast at 11 and then nothing, and I was waiting, and then we, go over there at 4:30 and there's already bringing out the chips and dips and things, and I was already vulnerable. So have I learned, don't go to a place like that hungry. Maybe I learned that the people that I have always eaten the bad food with are not the people that I should hang out with right now as I'm being vulnerable. Maybe I learned that watching football with that crowd isn't good. Maybe I need to find myself a healthy eating meetup and see if they have a Super Bowl party. And maybe, they'll have baby carrots and raw broccoli and cauliflower and hummus. I know, but I say hummus. Nobody knows what I'm talking about here. When people first started hearing about sesame paste, I would say, I'd like some trina. And the people at the health food store had no idea what I was talking about. So then I learned how to say tahini. But I discovered that I was online at the bakery once, and I heard this guy asking for a raisin challah, challah. It read it ch raisin challah. So anyway, we were turning a bad day into good data. So you might want to find yourself a party where people are eating the way you want to eat, and you want to titrate things. If you're just learning how to skydive, maybe you don't jump off the cliff at maybe you don't go out of a plane at 40,000 feet. Maybe you don't hang glide off of El Capitan. Maybe you titrate to what you're able to do, taking baby steps, toddler steps, tween steps until you can know that you can go anywhere and will not be affected by the situation, by peer pressure, etc. All right, so how do we pre-worry? Oh, a doggy. Step one, practice non-judgmental curiosity. So pre-worry means anticipate, means think about what could happen in the future. Non-judgmental curiosity, because if we start judging ourselves in advance, we're not going to get anywhere. Judgment immediately shuts down creativity, it shuts down possibility. And so from this place of non-judgmental curiosity, we look at our life, look over the horizon, look at our calendar, say, let's, for this coming month, what could trip me up here? Where are some spots where I might fail? What are these points of vulnerability? What are the points of vulnerability that could keep me from reaching my goals here, that could keep me from eating right, could keep me from exercising? And look into the future and see them. And when you find one, and be real honest, say, yeah, I could see, don't be Pollyannish. I could see how that could be a challenge. I'm going to this, let's take the Super Bowl. You're looking in the middle of January, you're going to a Super Bowl party in 3 weeks. Say, well, what are my contingency plans? What could I do here? Could I avoid the situation? Very often when we're starting out, avoid is the best strategy. Sometimes it's not possible. If it's an office event, if it's something you have to do for work, there are things we can't avoid. Another strategy is to resist. And this is, in increasing power, it's better to be able to resist something than to need to avoid it. Because when you have to avoid it, you have to change your own plans. I can't go to this party. I'm going to call in sick at work. I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to move to another country. Avoiding, if it's the best thing we can do, then it can be a very good strategy, but it doesn't give us as much freedom as being able to resist, to walk into any situation, an uncomfortable situation, and be comfortable with the discomfort. That's, again, weightlifting. That's what builds muscles. But we also need to think about how we would recover from it. So let's say I can't avoid this. I've already said I was going to the party, or I don't want to avoid it. I'm going to resist it. I'm going to come up with all these strategies that would be strong. But I also have to say, well, if I do eat a chicken wing, what am I going to do to recover from that so I don't go down that slippery slope of the what the hell effect? Now, so that's pre-worry. Next is post-mortem. Post-mortem after death, literally. It means when we stumble, we want to look back and learn from it. Otherwise, if we're not willing to look back at our mistakes and learn from them, we're just going to keep making them. I saw a fun cartoon today, that saying, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So the cartoon then said, somebody said that, and then somebody else said, yes, and those who do study history are doomed to stand around helplessly while everybody else repeats it. So I don't want you to repeat history, and I don't want you to stand by helplessly while you repeat history. You have to be honest about your stumbles. So again, here, it helps to practice this non-judgmental curiosity, because when we're being judgmental to ourselves, it's hard to be honest. We're either going overboard or we're minimizing. Like, no, it was fine. It was no big deal. I'm allowed to have a chicken wing every once in a while. This is fine. And all of a sudden we find ourselves rationalizing to the point that our dietary goals and our behaviors are no longer in sync. So we want to be honest and say, yeah, I had a screw up at that party. I did something I didn't mean to do. And then the next thing is to ask the empowering question, what was missing? Not what have I done wrong, or why did this happen to me, or how do I punish myself, but what was missing? It's a really powerful question. I ask this often of my coaching clients when they tell me about something that didn't go well. I say, well, what was missing in that situation? And since we have a model, we don't have to just be, shooting at stars. We can actually use the behavior model to say what was missing. Was it motivation? Was it ability? Or was it a trigger? So at this Super Bowl party, how motivated were you to eat well? Probably not very. But so how could you have motivated yourself before you went to the Super Bowl party to eat better? Could you have read a chapter of a book that's important to you? Maybe you want to read The China Study or Whole or Proteinaholic or My Beef with Meat. Maybe you want to read an exercise book. Maybe you want to watch a 3-minute video of Jack LaLanne on his 70th birthday swimming 2 miles, pulling a whole bunch of rowboats. Right? I mean, so whatever it is, maybe you want to get out a card on which you've written down your health goals and your reasons why you want to have those health goals. For me, one of my big motivators is I want to be living independently in my 80s and 90s and beyond, so that my kids don't have to put me in a home or run around and take care of me and drive me places. I want to have eyesight. I want to be able to walk and mow my own lawn and cook food and not have to be an unnecessary burden. If something happens and they need to take care of me, well, that's cool too. But I would prefer that not be because I didn't do everything I could, so that my kids can have their own lives and I can be independent. And that comes up for me a lot. Maybe I write that down on a note card, on an index card. And before I go to the Super Bowl party, I pick up that card and I sit with it for a minute. And I read it and I think about it and I future pace 2 scenarios for my old age. One is I'm in assisted living and I'm drooling on myself and I don't recognize people. And my kids come in and they drag their kids with them and the kids are pulling at their sleeves going, "Can we go now? Grandpa smells." And the other future that I'm looking at is me working in my garden in my 90s, and I realize I'm out of fish fertilizer, or I don't have enough broccoli seeds, and so I go and I get in my car or hoverboard or whatever they're going to have in 40 years, and I go and I get it, and I can cook meals from the food that I've grown myself, and I can just picture those 2 scenarios. Say at this moment, what I'm eating is moving me closer to one or the other. And that's a way to increase motivation at times when we are potentially vulnerable. And then maybe ability was missing. Maybe I didn't have the ability to resist because I didn't bring food of my own. Maybe I just brought a 6-pack of beer or something. But what I could have done was bring some food that I love, that I don't have all the time, that I associate with noshing in front of the TV, with sports, with a festive occasion, and I could have made that. So for me, I have a recipe that I like to make of cauliflower buffalo wings. It's from Chef Del Schroff, who's the author of several cookbooks, including the one I got this from, the China Study Quick and Easy Cookbook. If I remember, I'll post it to comments on the YouTube for this video, so I'll post a link to that. China Study Quick and Easy. I can't remember exactly what page it's on, but it's in there. It's cauliflower that's battered with a kind of a spicy sriracha batter and baked in the oven. Whole food, plant-based, delicious. No buffaloes or chickens were de-winged for this dish. It's cauliflower. And I don't have it very often. So if I brought a big platter of that and I ate that, maybe that's what was missing. Maybe I didn't have the ability to think ahead, to plan that. Maybe I didn't have the ability to resist unless I had something else that I enjoyed equally. You know what? When I bring that dish to places, it's not just me eating it, but other people like it too. So it actually is one of the more popular dishes at various sort of outdoor sportsy potlucks. Was there a trigger missing? Or were there too many triggers for behaviors that you didn't want to have? So again, having the cauliflower finger food would be a trigger to eat it. But are there other triggers that weren't there? Maybe I don't know, wear a bracelet that says, live strong, right? A lot of people use that Lance Armstrong bracelet to remind themselves. I know people who wear bracelets to remind themselves not to complain and bitch and moan about things, but to be a little bit more stoic. They have gratitude bands. So is there a trigger that you could wear on your wrist that would remind you of your goals? And then finally, brainstorm for next time. So maybe next year, you've got 11 and a half months to think about how you're going to prepare for next year's Super Bowl party. All the things you're going to do between now and then to increase your ability, to set up the right triggers, to increase your motivation, so that next time, whether it's maybe it's the Super Bowl, maybe it's a March Madness party, maybe it's the Final Four, and everyone's going to gather for the same thing, and you'll be more able to act the way you want, to eat what you want, to behave the way you want. Or maybe you say, you know what, I'm not ready yet. I'm going to come up with an excuse and not go. Or I'm going to have the party at my house, and I'm going to set down ground rules and tell people what they can bring, and it's all going to be food that's safe for me. All of this is supported by that playful mindset. So that's why I didn't lead with the strategies, because without the mindsets, these strategies end up being sort of mental autoimmune attacks, where we end up saying, well, my big brain is just going to attack me because I didn't succeed. So, post-mortem sounds like an autopsy, like you're going to cut it up into little pieces and figure out everything that went wrong. We can also do it from a spirit of curiosity, creativity, playfulness, turning a bad day into good data so that the next bad day doesn't have to get turned into good data. So the next bad day can be something that we can avoid or resist, overcome. And eventually what happens, this happens to all of us in various things that were impossible become trivially easy. Anyone who's ever learned to walk knows that at a certain point, you watch a toddler learning how to walk, it's hard. It takes all their concentration. After a while, we're just walking around. We can walk around with our phones. We can walk into trucks and telephone poles and off of curbs. We don't even need to be paying attention to where we're going. Walking becomes so effortless, so second nature. I learned how to juggle, and I remember working on learning how to do clubs after I could do balls. And juggling clubs was very different. So a ball, you throw it up in the air, you know exactly how it's going to land. It's going to land in a ball because it's a circle. It's a ball. If you throw a club up in the air, it could land either with the handle facing you, it could land with the other side, whatever that's called, the bigger part facing you. It could land straight up. It could land tilted at any infinite number of angles. You don't know when you throw it up in the air, how many times is it even going to spin? Once, twice, 3 times? It's like tossing a quarter in the air and being able to predict how many times it's going to spin so you know whether it's going to land heads or tails. So I was practicing this, and I was throwing the thing up, and I can't tell you, I wore a bicycle helmet when I practiced, which was very good for concussions, but it didn't do much for bloody nose and split lips. I was just smacking myself, and I remember how hard it was and how, I would do 2 or 3 throws in a row and catch them, and I would just be amazed. And then eventually it just clicked. And then I could just juggle without thinking about it. And I didn't even have to look at them, and I could start doing tricks. I could try behind my back. And as soon as I tried a trick, everything fell apart again, and it became hard. And as soon as I integrated that trick, it became simple. It became trivial. I could do it. I could do that trick forever until I wanted to learn the next trick, or 4 clubs or 5 clubs. And then every time I wanted to add something, it went back to incompetence again. So there's the model of going from unconscious incompetence, which is you don't even know that you're no good at it. You don't even consider that there is a possibility of being good at it. And then you go to conscious incompetence, which is the point at which you decide to change. You say, you know what? I suck at this. I keep going to Super Bowl parties, I keep going out, and I keep ordering the wrong foods, eating the wrong foods. Now I'm conscious of my incompetence. And now you got to work at it. And you have to use all these strategies that we're talking about in the sessions to become consciously competent. And so you go to a party and you've got to pre-worry, you've got to post-mortem, you've got to think about motivation, ability, triggers. It's like learning how to juggle. Your brain is just exploding with variables. And at a certain point, you move to unconscious competence. And you go to the party and you say, well, that's not food. I don't eat that. They can eat that. It's not food for me. You know, you would if you went to a party and there was a can of paint thinner and people were pouring, paint thinner into their tumblers and drinking it, you wouldn't go, oh well, I guess I'll do that. That's paint thinner. That's poison. You wouldn't eat that. You get to that point. You get to that point in your own health journey where you're simply not tempted by situations, by foods, by social pressures that before you would have caved. And if you've never had that experience, I promise you it happens. So why do we pre-worry and post-mortem? Because when you prepare for success, you don't have to rely on willpower and motivation. Remember from weeks ago, when we first started this series, we talked about the problems with willpower and motivation as our sole anchors, as our sole supports on this journey. When you pre-worry and post-mortem, you're also telling yourself, I understand this is a process. You're cutting yourself some slack. And when you cut yourself slack, there is a danger to cutting yourself too much slack and saying, well, anything goes, I can always repent tomorrow, no worries, versus no slack means that it's the slightest step off the straight and narrow, and you're spiraling into what the hell? You're spiraling into the shame cycle of addiction. But perhaps the most important reason to pre-worry and post-mortem is because you're creating a habit of constant improvement. That you are recognizing that this is a journey, this is a long-term commitment to betterment. And maybe today it's diet, tomorrow it's exercise, then it's mental health, then it's sleep routine, then it's relationships, then it's productivity at work. And you see yourself as a work of art, always in creation. And that's a very different mentality from our society, which is quick fix, right? I'm all of a sudden I'm motivated. I become a junkie for that adrenaline rush of motivation, and I'm going to drive as far as I can on that tank of motivational gas until it's fumes, and I'm my car dead in the desert, and I have to trudge home with my head between my knees. Right? We have a quick fix mentality. I'm just going to solve it once and done. Or we talked about this the very first week, all those mistakes. But when you pre-worry and post-mortem, you say this is a process, and this is a commitment, and this is a lifelong journey that is much more powerful and much more doable, much more reasonable. So, to summarize the whole thing, where are we on time here, by the way? Oh, 10 minutes. Wow, so this is a four-part series after all. We talked about in part one, many weeks ago, the problem with motivation. Why motivation is the weakest, most fickle engine of change that we can use. Why we can't bottle it, we can't have it when we want it, we can't rely upon it, and when we do have it, we have to look upon it as a very precious gift, not to be squandered, but to be turned into either increased ability or reliable generative triggers. Part two, we talked about the 3 shift mindsets. We talked about the ways of thinking about shifting, about changing our behavior. We talked about being playful, about being patient, and being positive. And you could argue that all 3 of those are flavors of the same thing, this kind of upbeat, non-judgmental approach, long-term approach. That this is not, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are our habits. In part 3, which we just concluded today, the 3 shift strategies. We talked about shrinking the shift, about tackling the beachhead, taking something manageable and mastering it rather than spending our effort diffusely trying to improve everything all at once. Tackle one thing at a time, make it as small as possible. We talked about flossing. We talked about changing one little element of your diet. The second shift strategy was to tweak the backdrop, to look at what is our environment doing to determine our behaviors, and how can we change it in meaningful ways so that small strategic changes in the environment lead to long-term changes in behavior, either through increasing our ability, so we change our environment to make something easier to do. If I sharpen my knives, then cutting is easier. If I take a course, then I've changed myself and I've increased my ability. If I change my environment by signing up for a weekly session with a personal trainer that I have prepaid and would feel bad about missing, or I call a buddy and we're going to start running together, all of a sudden my external environment has changed from my physical space, my social space, my family space, and now I have higher levels of motivation or more reliable motivation or increased ability. So we talked about the second strategy was to tweak the backdrop, which determines to a large extent how we behave. And the third one, which we covered today, was pre-worry and post-mortem, to have a part of ourselves working on this Kaizen principle of constant improvement, of always looking at situations and learning from them rather than recriminating or simply recriminating or congratulating ourselves. You know, if you're from this culture or pretty much any Western culture, you went to school and you got grades. And I don't know about you, but when I was pretty grade grubby, and I wanted to know that I'd gotten a good grade, much more so than I wanted to know that I'd actually learned or understood something. So occasionally I'd write a paper, and I'd get the paper back, and the teacher would write the letter grade and then would write a paragraph or two responding. It's a very nice thing to do, to sort of, you know, respect me enough to respond to the words I wrote, to my concept, maybe questions, sometimes arguments. I'd say, I don't think this was actually supported here. This was very interesting. I'd never thought of that before. Kind of, you know, very respectful dialogue. I've got to say, I never looked at that stuff. I just saw the grade. Oh, it's an A. That's all I need to know. Oh no, it's a B plus? Huh. But I never thought to take in anything deeper. It was simply good or bad. And that became the be all and end all of the feedback. And there's so much more richness, so much more nuance, so much more instruction in non-binary feedback, instead of just saying, yes, I succeeded, oh, I failed, but in looking closely at what caused what, where did things start going wrong, where did I see, where could I have intervened, what could I have done? And that principle of Kaizen, of constant improvement, is the third principle. And it's the reason that's so exciting. It's not just because it works, but because we get to look at our lives the way artists look at their lives or look at their work. It's something that we can be creative about. I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of job you have. I don't care how badly you think you can draw, or you can't sing, or you can't dance, or you can't write poetry. Every one of us is creating our life every minute. And using these principles, not just around health, but around anything, means that we acknowledge that we are the author of our life, the creative writer of our own life. And that's a very, very exciting, empowering, and joyful way to live. So I hereby declare this 4-part series complete on habit formation, on how to shift behaviors. Next week, I think I want to talk about motivation. which might sound a little funny because I've been spending a lot of time in this series saying motivation isn't the be all and end all, but it is important. And it's kind of an undercurrent. And if we don't have motivation or we lose motivation, there are a lot of different models of motivation. And I'm not going to argue about which one's right or which one's wrong, but kind of present them to you as a palette from which you can choose. Because when you do feel motivated, as I said, it's powerful fuel. And when we understand motivation better, we can use it. Just because it's not the most common strategy doesn't mean it's not valuable. So, tune in next week where we'll talk all about motivation. If you have questions, comments, if you have aspects of your health, your life that you would like to work on, check in, Skype us. I didn't even give the numbers today, but you can, if you're watching this on Nissan Communications, the numbers and the Skype number are there to the right. I'll just remind you of those events that are coming up if you live in the Triangle region of North Carolina. There's the Healthy Chocolate class on the 13th. There is a free introductory dinner on the 18th, and on the 20th, there is a 3-hour boot camp on how to get started for members. If you live outside of the Triangle and you would like to consult with me, you can go to trianglebewell.com and fill out the consultation form. Let me know what's up. I do really most of my work at this point virtually via phone or Skype, so that's not an issue. It's not a problem. I can help you be well. I can help you become well to get off of most of your meds probably. Well, obviously each individual case is different, but that's what I do. I help people become well through lifestyle changes, through empowerment, through informed decision-making about their own health care, rather than sort of following blindly along with whatever the medical establishment is pushing this week. So I want to thank Amnon, as always, for your water, for your hospitality, and for all your digital and audio-visual expertise.
You're welcome.
And as always, be well, my friends.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.